The ancient oaks of the Midnight Fong territory stood as silent, judgmental witnesses to the night's festivities. Their gnarled branches, draped in silvery moss, seemed to clutch at the rising moon, pulling it higher into the velvet expanse of the sky. Below, the air thrummed with a primal energy, a mix of eager anticipation and the raw, untamed power of the shift waiting to be unleashed. Torches, dipped in pungent wolfsbane oil, flickered and spat, casting long dancing shadows that made the gathered pack members look like a gathering of restless spirits. Among them, a young woman named Sienna moved with a lightness that belied her lowly status. As an Omega, she was the last, the least, the one upon whom the pack's frustrations and hierarchies were settled. Yet tonight, the usual weight on her shoulders felt as insubstantial as mist. Her heart was a wild drum, beating a rhythm of pure, unadulterated joy against her ribs. For tonight was the full moon ceremony, and tonight she would finally, officially, accept her destined mate, Marcus. He was everything an Omega was not: strong, a top warrior of the Midnight Fong, with a laugh that could command a room and a smile that had stolen her breath since they were pups playing in the creek. The mate bond, that invisible golden thread that had connected their souls since adolescence, had been a secret treasure she carried, a promise of a future where her rank wouldn't matter. Only their connection would. She smoothed down the simple borrowed linen of her ceremonial dress, its off-white fabric a stark contrast to the finer, darker silks of the higher-ranked she-wolves who eyed her with barely concealed disdain. She ignored them. Let them whisper. Soon she would be standing by Marcus's side, and their whispers would turn to shock, then to grudging respect. She could already feel the phantom warmth of his hand in hers, could hear the ancient words of the bonding vow they would recite to the moon goddess together. The Alpha's voice boomed across the clearing, calling the pack to gather for the pre-ceremony feast. The scent of roasting venison and sweet mead filled the air, but Sienna had no stomach for it. Her nerves were alight, a jangling bundle of excitement and fear. She needed to find Marcus, to steal one private moment with him before the formalities began, to see the same eager light in his eyes that she felt burning in her own. She slipped away from the bustling crowd, the noise fading into a dull roar behind her as she moved toward the back of the large wooden meeting hall. This was their spot. The place he'd first confessed he felt the pull of the bond to. A smile played on her lips as she rounded the corner, the words of greeting already forming on her tongue. But the words died unspoken. The sounds that met her ears were not the gentle rustle of the night breeze. They were something else entirely. A low, intimate murmur, followed by a breathy, feminine giggle that was most certainly not meant for public consumption. And then, a voice she would know in her deepest dreams, Marcus's voice, laughing softly, whispering words that were meant for one person alone. A cold dread, sharp as an icicle, pierced the warm bubble of her happiness. Her feet, moving of their own volition, carried her forward. Peering into the deep shadow between the hall and the thick trunk of an ancient redwood, she saw them. There, wrapped in an embrace so close they seemed like one creature, was Marcus. Entangled in his arms was Chloe, a beautiful, cunning she-wolf from a high-ranking family. His hands were buried in her hair, and hers were clutching at the back of his tunic. Their lips were locked in a kiss that was anything but innocent. It was hungry, possessive, and utterly devastating. Sienna's world didn't just shatter. It exploded into a million silent, screaming pieces. The golden thread of the mate bond, which had moments before felt so strong and vibrant, snapped with an almost audible twang deep within her soul. The pain was instantaneous and physical, a searing hot agony in her chest that stole the air from her lungs. She stumbled back, a choked gasp escaping her. The sound broke them apart. Marcus turned, his eyes wide for a fraction of a second before they narrowed. Annoyance flashed across his handsome features, not guilt, not shame. Pure irritation at being interrupted. Chloe merely smirked, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Sienna?" Marcus said, his voice flat. He didn't even bother to step away from Chloe. "This isn't what it looks like." The sheer, pathetic absurdity of the lie broke the paralysis of her shock. The pain curdled, transforming into a white-hot fury that burned away the last of her tears. "It looks," she said, her voice trembling not with sadness but with a rage so pure it shocked even her, "like you're kissing another she-wolf hours before you're supposed to pledge yourself to me." Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable for a moment, but Chloe just laughed, a tinkling, cruel sound. "Oh, come on, little Omega. Did you really think a warrior like him could be satisfied with you? You're barely more than a pup. He needs a real she-wolf by his side." Marcus shot Chloe a warning look, but then his shoulders straightened. He looked at Sienna and his gaze was cold, dismissive. Chloe understands the demands of my position. She knows what it means to be with a top warrior. You're just an Omega, Sienna. A sweet distraction, but you could never truly be the Luna I need. The bond was a mistake. Each word was a dagger, expertly aimed to inflict maximum damage. He wasn't just rejecting her. He was erasing her, dismissing their entire connection as a trivial error. The pack had begun to notice the commotion. Heads were turning. Whispers started to rise, curious and hungry for drama. The Alpha, a grizzled old wolf named Boren, pushed his way through the gathering crowd. "What is the meaning of this disruption?" he growled, his eyes landing on the trio. He took in the scene, Sienna's devastated but furious posture, Marcus's defiant stance, Chloe's smug expression, and his face hardened. He saw a valuable warrior and a high-ranked she-wolf, and he saw a problem, the Omega. "Alpha," Sienna began, her voice stronger now, fueled by injustice. "It's nothing, Alpha," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "A simple misunderstanding. Sienna is overreacting. She doesn't understand the complexities of a warrior's life." The Alpha nodded as if that explained everything. "Control your mate, Marcus. We have a ceremony to begin." The dismissal was absolute. Her pain, her betrayal was nothing. It was an overreaction. She was an inconvenience to be managed. That was the final spark. The inferno of her anger consumed every last bit of hurt and humiliation. She stood tall, pushing her shoulders back, and looked not at Marcus but at the Alpha, and then at the entire gathered pack of Midnight Fong. Her voice, when it came, did not shout. It was low, clear, and carried on the night air with a power that silenced every whisper, that stilled every movement. "There will be no ceremony." Marcus scoffed. "Don't be dramatic, Sienna." She ignored him, her eyes blazing with a light no one had ever seen in the Meek Omega. "Marcus," she declared, her voice ringing with absolute finality. "I reject you." A collective gasp swept through the pack. A female rejecting her mate was unheard of. An Omega doing it was unimaginable. Marcus's face flushed with anger and humiliation. "You can't. I am your destined mate." "You were," Sienna corrected him, the words tasting like freedom. "You broke that destiny the moment you chose her. The bond is severed. I am free of you." She turned her back on his sputtering fury, on Chloe's shocked face, on the Alpha's disapproving glare. She faced the dark, ominous line of the forbidden forest that bordered their territory. The woods that were rumored to be haunted, patrolled by creatures far more terrifying than any werewolf. She had nothing left. No mate, no pack, no home. Only her pride, burning brightly in the ruins of her old life. With one last look at the world that had always diminished her, she made a choice. A crazy, reckless, glorious choice. "You think an Omega is nothing?" she called out to them all, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. "You think I have no value? I will find a new mate tonight. And he will be stronger and more powerful than any wolf in this pathetic pack." And before anyone could move, before Marcus could lunge for her, before the Alpha could order her stopped, Sienna turned and ran. She sprinted past the torches, past the boundary markers, and plunged into the deep, consuming darkness of the forbidden woods, not caring what horrors awaited her, because she had already faced the worst horror of all. The world dissolved into a chaotic blur of shadows and snapping branches. Sienna ran, not with any sense of direction, but with the raw, panicked instinct of a wounded animal fleeing a trap. The celebratory sounds of the Midnight Fong pack were swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive silence of the ancient forest. It was a different kind of quiet here, not peaceful, but watchful and heavy, as if the very trees were holding their breath. Tears she had been too proud to shed in front of her pack now streamed down her face, hot and relentless, cutting paths through the dust on her skin. Each sob was a ragged gasp that tore at her throat. The pain was a living thing, a monstrous weight crushing her chest, making it hard to breathe. It wasn't just the betrayal, though that was a festering wound. It was the humiliation. The dismissive look in Marcus's eyes. The Alpha's cold disregard. The way her entire existence had been reduced to a mere inconvenience. She was nothing to them. Less than nothing. She stumbled over an exposed root, crashing hard onto the damp, leaf-strewn earth. The impact jarred her bones, and for a long moment she just lay there, the cool moisture seeping into her dress, the scent of decaying leaves and rich soil filling her nostrils. The urge to give up, to simply close her eyes and let the forest claim her, was a seductive whisper. What was left for her? A life as an outcast, a rogue wolf with no pack, no protection, forever haunted by the scorn of the only home she had ever known? But then the image of Marcus and Chloe tangled together flashed behind her eyes. The cold arrogance on his face. The triumphant smirk on hers. A fresh wave of fury, hotter and cleaner than the despair, surged through her veins. No. She would not give them the satisfaction. She would not lie down and die in the dirt like some forgotten thing. She had declared she would find a new mate, a stronger one. It had been a wild, impossible boast born of sheer spite, but the words had been spoken. And Sienna, Omega or not, was not a liar. Pushing herself up, she wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing dirt and tears together. She took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing herself to truly look at her surroundings. The forest was immense. Towering trees, their trunks wider than she was tall, formed a dense canopy that blocked most of the moonlight, leaving the forest floor in a perpetual, gloomy twilight. Strange, bioluminescent fungi clung to rotting logs, casting an eerie, greenish glow. The air was thick with scents she didn't recognize, foreign moss, unfamiliar prey and something else. Something old and powerful that made the wolf within her whimper and cower. She was in the heart of the forbidden territory. The territory of the Lycans. Every pup in her pack was warned about this place. Stories were told around campfires to scare them into obedience. The Lycans were not like them. They were ancient, primordial, a different breed of shapeshifter altogether. They were bigger, faster, fiercer. Their wolves were monstrous, more beast than man, and their kings ruled with an iron fist from stone castles hidden deep within these woods. To trespass here was a death sentence. A new kind of fear, colder and more primal than the heartbreak, began to coil in her stomach. She had to get out. But which way was out? Every direction looked the same, a labyrinth of shadows and towering timber. The moon, her goddess, was hidden from view, offering no guidance. She chose a direction at random and began to walk, her steps cautious and silent. The forest seemed to press in on her, every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig, sounding like a thunderclap in the silence. Her senses, heightened by her wolf, were overwhelmed, feeding her a constant stream of information that her terrified mind could barely process. Then everything went still, the constant chirping of unseen insects ceased. The gentle rustle of the wind in the highest branches died away. It was a silence so complete, so profound, it was louder than any noise. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. Her wolf, which had been cowering, suddenly pressed against her skin, not in fear but in awestruck submission. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, a biological imperative to yield. A low, deep growl rumbled through the clearing, a sound so visceral it seemed to vibrate through the soles of her feet and into her very soul. It was the sound of power made audible. From between two massive oaks, it emerged. At first, it was just a deeper shadow, a patch of darkness that detached itself from the rest. Then it resolved into a form that made Sienna's blood run cold. It was a wolf, but unlike any she had ever seen or imagined. It was colossal, its shoulders level with her head. Its fur was not the gray or brown of her pack, but a shade of midnight black so deep it seemed to absorb the faint light around it, etched with subtle silver patterns that gleamed like etched metal. Its eyes glowed not with the gold or blue of a werewolf, but with a fierce, ancient amber, pupils slitted like a great cat's. Its muscles coiled and shifted under its hide with every silent step, promising impossible speed and devastating strength. This was a Lycan. The stories hadn't done it justice. This was a king of beasts. It stopped a mere 10 paces from her, and the full force of its presence washed over her. It was not just its size, it was the sheer, overwhelming aura of dominance, of age, of absolute authority. Sienna found she could not move. She could not breathe. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was how she would die. Not as a rejected Omega but as a foolish trespasser. The Lycan took another step forward, its head lowering, its massive jaws parting slightly to reveal teeth like daggers. It was going to end her. She squeezed her eyes shut, awaiting the final blow. But it didn't come. Instead she heard a sound like cracking stone and shifting earth. A warm, golden light replaced the darkness behind her eyelids. Cautiously she opened her eyes. Where the monstrous wolf had stood there was now a man. He was tall, impossibly so, with broad shoulders that seemed to block out the world. His skin was tanned, and his torso was a map of hard-earned muscle and old, faint scars that spoke of countless battles. His face was all sharp, commanding angles, a strong jaw, a blade-straight nose and eyes that still held that same ancient amber glow. His hair was as dark as his wolf's fur. He was, without question, the most formidable and terrifyingly handsome man she had ever seen. And he was looking directly at her. His expression was unreadable, a mask of cool assessment. There was no anger, no immediate threat, just an intense, probing curiosity that felt more invasive than any glare. "Who are you?" His voice was a deep, resonant baritone that wrapped around her in the silence. "And why do you trespass in my kingdom, little wolf? And why do you smell of tears and broken vows?" The question, so direct and yet so perceptive, shattered the last of her composure. He didn't sound like a monster about to rend her limb from limb. He sounded curious, and in her state of utter devastation, that simple curiosity was a lifeline. The whole story, the entire night's humiliation and pain, came pouring out of her in a rushed, trembling torrent. She told him of Marcus, of the betrayal, of the cruel words, of the Alpha's dismissal. She spoke of her foolish, prideful declaration to the entire pack and her desperate, reckless flight into his woods. She held nothing back because what did it matter now? She was speaking to a king who held the power of life and death over her. There was no point in lies or pride anymore. He listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't scoff, didn't dismiss her pain. His glowing amber eyes remained fixed on her, taking in every word, every hitch in her breath, every trace of anger that flickered behind the tears. When she finally finished, her voice breaking, she stood there, waiting for his judgment. For his sentence. The Lycan King was silent for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful. He looked at this small, disheveled werewolf, covered in dirt and tears, who had just shown more spine in rejecting her entire world than most of his own warriors possessed. "You told them you would find a mate stronger than any in their pack," he stated, his voice low and measured. It wasn't a question. Sienna nodded, her cheeks flushing with fresh embarrassment at her own audacity. "It was a stupid thing to say. I was just angry." "Anger is a powerful motivator," he mused, taking a slow step closer. He stopped just an arm's length away, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The sheer power radiating from him was dizzying. "You sought to save your pride. A worthy endeavor." He paused, his eyes scanning her face as if seeing something there no one else ever had. "You need a new mate. A powerful one. To make your words true. To make your rejection absolute." Sienna could only stare, confused. Where was he going with this? The king's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. "You are looking at him." Sienna's mind went completely, utterly blank. The words made no sense. They simply would not arrange themselves into a coherent thought. "I am Rylan," he said, as if that explained everything. And in a way it did. His name was legend. The Shadow King. The unchallenged ruler of all Lycans. "My court is tedious. They pester me to take a Luna. A queen. They wish for a symbol of stability. I have no interest in the simpering daughters of noble Lycans they parade before me." His amber eyes burned into hers. "But you who faced your entire pack to reclaim your honor. You who ran into certain death out of sheer principle. You are not simpering. You have a fire in you that is intriguing." He took one final step, closing the distance between them. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat of his body, could smell the wild, clean scent of storm air and pine that clung to him. "So, I will make you an offer, Sienna of no pack," Rylan said, his voice dropping to an intimate rumble. "Marry me. Be my Luna. Stand by my side. In return, I will give you a title, a home, and a mate so far above the one who rejected you that he will seem like a speck of dust in your memory. Your boast will not be a lie. It will be the truth, and your old pack will whisper your name in fear and awe for generations to come." He finally reached out, but not to grab her. He simply extended his hand, palm up, an invitation. "A choice. It will be a bargain. A business arrangement between two people who need something from each other. Do we have an agreement?" Sienna looked from his powerful, offered hand up to his impossibly handsome, serious face. Her world had ended and been reborn in the span of an hour. It was madness. It was terrifying. It was the most insane thing she had ever heard. But as she looked into the eyes of the Lycan King, she didn't see cruelty or mockery. She saw a reflection of her own defiance. She saw a chance. Not just for revenge, but for a future she could never have dreamed of. With a breath that felt like the first real breath of her new life, she placed her small, trembling hand into his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and impossibly secure. "Yes," she whispered, the word feeling like a vow. "We have an agreement." The journey to Rylan's castle was a silent, surreal passage through a world Sienna could never have imagined. They did not walk. The moment her hand was in his, the world seemed to blur and twist around them. It was a mode of travel she didn't understand, a testament to the vast, unknowable power of the Lycan King. One moment they were in the dark, silent woods, the next they were standing before a structure that stole the breath from her lungs. It wasn't a castle from fairy tales. It was a fortress carved from the living mountain itself, a symphony of dark stone and gleaming obsidian that speared the night sky. Towers, sharp and formidable, stood as silent sentinels. The air here was different, thinner, colder, and crackling with a latent energy that made the tiny hairs on her arms stand on end. This was a place of immense power, a seat of rule for a being who commanded not just wolves, but the very essence of the wild. Rylan did not let go of her hand. His grip was firm, anchoring her in the whirlwind of her own disbelief. They passed through massive gates that opened without a sound, into a courtyard where figures moved in the shadows. Lycans. They were all tall, powerful, their auras humming with strength that would have made the strongest warrior in her old pack seem like a child. They stopped and stared, their eyes, gold, amber, silver, widening in shock as they took in their king, and then the small, disheveled, clearly werewolf female he was leading by the hand. The whispers started immediately, a low, buzzing undercurrent of disbelief and suspicion. Sienna felt their gazes like physical weights, judging her borrowed dress, her dirty skin, her lowly omega scent. She instinctively tried to shrink back, to make herself smaller, but Rylan's hand tightened around hers, a silent command to stand tall. He stopped in the center of the grand courtyard and turned to face the gathering crowd. His expression, which had been almost neutral with her, hardened into a mask of absolute, unquestionable authority. The amber glow in his eyes intensified, and a wave of pure dominance rolled off him, so potent it forced every single Lycan to lower their eyes and dip their heads in submission. "Hear me," his voice rang out, clear and cold, needing no raised volume to command absolute attention. "This is Sienna. She is my chosen mate. She is to be your Luna. You will afford her every respect, every loyalty, every ounce of devotion you owe to me. Her word is my word. Her safety is your primary concern. Is this understood?" The silence was deafening. Then as one, the assembled Lycans murmured, "Yes, my king. Welcome, Luna." The words were spoken, but Sienna could feel the skepticism, the confusion rolling off them in waves. She was an outsider. A werewolf. She smelled of a weak pack in tears. She was not one of them. Rylan had given the order, but he could not force their hearts to accept her. That, she realized with a sinking feeling, would be a battle she would have to fight alone. The next few days were a disorienting whirlwind. She was given chambers that were larger than her entire old pack house, with a balcony that looked out over the entire, mist-shrouded kingdom. Servants attended to her, their movements efficient but their eyes cautious and distant. They brought her clothes of the finest silks and warmest furs, food that was exquisite and unfamiliar, but every meal eaten alone in the cavernous dining hall felt like a test she was failing. Rylan was often absent, attending to the endless duties of a king. But when he was present he was different. He sought her out. Not for ceremony but for conversation. He asked her opinions on border disputes, on trade agreements with distant shifter clans. At first she was too terrified to speak, convinced her simple Omega thoughts would be foolish to a centuries-old king. But he listened, his head tilted, his intense gaze never leaving her face. Tentatively she began to offer her thoughts. She saw things not from a place of power but from a place of community, of the needs of the lowest members of a pack, and she realized that a king who never heard those perspectives ruled only half a kingdom. He began to take his evening meal with her in her chambers, the setting intimate, the conversation stretching long into the night. The strict business arrangement he had proposed began to feel like a thin veil over something else, something warmer and more terrifyingly real. She found herself watching the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the rare slight smile that softened his stern features when she said something clever. She learned about the weight of his crown, the loneliness of his power, and he learned about her resilience, her quiet humor, the strength that had been forged in the fire of rejection. A fragile, tentative connection began to weave itself between them, a new bond, spun from shared stories and quiet understanding instead of ancient magic. It was a bond that felt, to Sienna, infinitely more valuable. It was during one of these quiet dinners, a week after her arrival, that a commotion echoed from the main gates. Shouts, the sound of a scuffle. Rylan's head snapped up, his eyes instantly glowing with predatory alertness. A guard appeared at the door, bowing deeply. "My king. A werewolf from the Midnight Fong Pack. He demands an audience. He is most insistent." Sienna's blood ran cold. She knew. Even before Rylan's protective gaze swung to her, she knew. Rylan's face was a thundercloud. "Send him away." "Wait," Sienna said, her voice surprisingly steady. She placed her hand on Rylan's arm, feeling the tense muscle beneath his skin. No. I want to see him. I want him to see me. Rylan studied her for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. Bring him to the throne room. The throne room was a place of terrifying grandeur, designed to humble any who entered. And there, standing small and furious in the center of the vast space, was Marcus. He looked travel-worn, his clothes dirty, his face a mask of outrage and jealousy. His eyes scanned the room wide with awe and fear until they landed on her. And then they widened further in pure, unadulterated shock. Sienna was not the crying, dirt-streaked Omega he had last seen. She stood beside the immense obsidian throne, dressed in a gown of deep blue velvet that matched her eyes, a silver circlet resting on her brow. She stood with a posture of grace and authority she didn't know she possessed. And at her side, a hand resting possessively on the small of her back, was the Lycan King, his presence a silent, roaring threat. Sienna. Marcus blurted out, his voice echoing foolishly in the silent hall. What is this? What have you done? You need to come home at once. Rylan didn't move, didn't speak. He simply let his power fill the room, a suffocating pressure that made Marcus sweat. Sienna took a small step forward. Her heart was pounding, but not with fear. With power. I am home, Marcus. This is not your home, he snarled, taking a step forward before a low, simultaneous growl from the Lycan guards lining the walls froze him in place. You belong with me. With your pack. This is a mistake. You're confused. He's twisted your mind. Sienna looked at him, and for the first time she saw not the powerful warrior she had idolized, but a small, petty, frightened man. The only one who twisted anything was you, she said, her voice clear and cold. You broke our bond. You ended it. I merely made it official. I didn't mean it, he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice as he finally understood the reality of what he was seeing. It was a moment of weakness. Chloe means nothing. The bond, Sienna, the mate bond is forever. You can't just replace me. You are correct, a deep voice rumbled from behind her. Rylan finally spoke. He moved to stand beside Sienna, his tall frame a shield. A true mate bond is sacred. But you desecrated yours. She did not replace you. He looked down at Sienna, and his gaze, when it met hers, was no longer that of a king making a business deal. It was filled with a warmth, a possessiveness, a promise that made her breath catch. She upgraded. He turned his burning amber eyes back to Marcus. You are a stain on her past. I am her future. You are dismissed. The finality in his tone was absolute. Marcus looked from Rylan's terrifying visage to Sienna's calm, resolved face. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a hollow, hopeless realization. He had lost. Not just her but everything. He had thrown away a diamond for a piece of glass, and now the diamond sat upon a throne. He turned, shoulders slumped, and was escorted away without another word, his defeat complete. The great doors of the throne room boomed shut, leaving Sienna and Rylan alone in the vast silence. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving Sienna trembling. The confrontation was over. She had won. But it felt empty compared to the man standing beside her. Rylan turned to her. The kingly mask was gone. In its place was an expression of raw, undisguised intensity. He was wrong about everything, Rylan said, his voice a low, intimate vibration that she felt in her bones. But he was right about one thing. A mate bond is forever. He reached up and gently cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. The touch was electric, sending shivers through her entire body. Our arrangement, he murmured, his eyes searching hers. It was a convenient lie for an inconvenient truth. What truth? Sienna whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. That from the moment I saw you, covered in tears and dirt and more courage than any creature I have ever known, you were not a business partner. He leaned closer, his breath warm on her lips. You were my mate. My true fated mate. And this, he whispered, his lips a hair's breadth from hers, is no bargain. And then he closed the final, impossible distance. His kiss was not gentle. It was a claiming. A confession. It was fire and storm and destiny all rolled into one. It was everything she had ever dreamed a kiss should be and nothing she had ever experienced. It held the power of a king and the tenderness of a man who had found his other half. She kissed him back with all the passion and hope and love that had been building inside her since he first offered her his hand in the dark woods, pouring every ounce of her soul into it. When they finally broke apart, breathless and forever changed, foreheads resting together, Sienna knew. The broken promise with Marcus had led her here. To her true mate. To her king. To her forever. Their story is just beginning. Subscribe to stay updated on new stories.